If you're like me, you're always hunting for that next big MMO or survival game to immerse yourself in and let your real-world problems fade away as you slowly replace them with virtual ones. And aside from my decade-long obsession with Star Citizen, Funcom's next upcoming MMO, Dune Awakening, might just be that game. But with concerns about Funcom's past, and Dune Awakening's surprisingly early release date, does the game stand a chance? In this video, I'll dive into what makes Dune Awakening such a promising MMO, some possible red flags, and whether we should be worried about its early 2025 release window announced in August. To help answer those questions, we first need to talk about what sort of MMO Dune Awakening actually is and isn't. And I'll be covering more Dune Awakening content in the future, so if by the end you got something out of the video, consider hitting the sub button and liking it for more later on. We just received a ton of new information and gameplay footage from Gamescom, which gave us a bigger glimpse into the kind of gameplay we can expect from the game, some of which was well received, and other parts not so much. Dune Awakening is a hybrid survival Dune MMO set in an alternate timeline during the war on Arrakis, where Paul Muad'Dib, the Chosen One, this guy, was never born and instead a girl was born in his place, which means no all-powerful Chosen One, no Lisan al-Gaib, to lead the Fremen to paradise and overthrow the evil Harkonnens on Arrakis. This gives the developers narrative freedom to attack the Dune story differently, potentially for years to come, and as someone who's been a fan of the Dune video game and movie universe for the last 30 years,
he knows about the spies.
This should be a refreshing approach to the IP. The game is filled with the sort of survival mechanics you've grown to expect from your typical survival games, but set on the ruthless desert planet of Arrakis, where water, spice, credits, and faction politics are key to survival, while of course dodging environmental threats like sandstorms and giant sandworms as you attempt to cross the sand or scavenge resources for crafting. Gathering, looting, salvaging, and building make up the foundation of your activities in the game, with the option for combined arms PvP and spice raids inside the massive deep desert PvP zone. This is where you'll be interacting with hundreds of other players throughout your playtime, vying for rich spice fields, loot, and dungeon access. Unlike the Haga Basin PvE zones, which are more like massive 40 to 50 player survival maps akin to the size of Conan Exiles, where you'll start the game and accrue resources and powers solo or with friends before building an ornithopter and venturing out into the overland map. This is the system the game uses to allow the players of the world to travel between the game zones, i.e. the deep desert, or the game's faction social hubs, Harko Village and Arrakeen. To achieve the large player scale of the deep desert, my Star Citizen viewers might be interested to hear that the game is using a less sophisticated version of server meshing, where currently in the beta they are using 9 meshed servers to support the 500-kilometer zone, where Funcom estimates a concurrency of around 1,000 players, although they can't all be in the same area or on screen at once, and Funcom aims to handle this by using in-world measures like sandstorms or Imperial interference to manage numbers. Yeah, it's server meshing light. The game features level and skill-based character progression, with players able to learn and use a handful of interchangeable active abilities and passives from a mixture of class-based skill trees at any one time.
To work together to complement each other. So this is the skill tree. Here you can equip different types of abilities and techniques. We have 3 slots for abilities and 3 slots for techniques. And there are multiple different trees depending on the type of trainers that you've interacted with in the world. So our character here is going to equip a series of abilities that complements the rest of their group. In this case, Swordmaster techniques.
Equipment choice and loadout also unlock different offensive and defensive capabilities, and the goal is for the best items and gear to be craftable, with Joel Bylos mentioning the GOAT, Star Wars Galaxies, as some of his inspiration for Dune Awakening. The crafting is a large part of the game, and players will be able to create unique, reproducible blueprints using the blueprint system for buildings and items to trade, share, or sell on the market. There is more to Dune Awakening, like the Landsrad political system giving players voting rights and chances to alter the in-game world globally, or the fact that the deep desert is routinely wiped and reset every week as the Coriolis storm blows through, creating a fresh PvP experience on a weekly basis. But from what I can tell, Funcom is really just pulling inspiration here from the best features of other MMOs and survival games and tying them together under a captivating IP, while minimizing the stress and time requirements of typical survival games, like needing to be online 24/7 to protect your base, since as long as you keep your base in the PvE zones powered on and taxed, it can't be destroyed. The PvP in the game is optional, and the crafting, blueprint system, and UI removes a whole load of tedium when it comes to building. This is a game that wants to appeal to a broader audience of MMO and survival game fans alike. Dune Awakening isn't trying to reinvent the wheel here, and as a long-term Star Citizen backer and creator, this is a breath of fresh air and why I intend to cover more Dune Awakening in the future. But, and there is always a but, this MMO has only been in development for around 5 years, with an early 2025 release date revealed in August, which took many by surprise, including me, because there are clearly some elephants in the room that need to be addressed first. Combat is an integral part of any MMO, and from what we've seen so far, DA's combat looks clunky and not up to a standard you'd expect from a game and universe that relies so heavily on fluid combat, particularly when it comes to melee.
It's melee time. This character has Swordmaster abilities. First of all, the knee charge, which is about getting in close to do damage in combat, and then quickly setting up to a riposte, which allows you to parry and return massive amounts of damage to your enemy. Of course, later in the game, when enemies have shields, melee is a much more emphasized style of combat.
The melee system seems to amount to aiming while button mashing attacks and mixing in the occasional melee ability, such as riposte, to parry other incoming melee moves. There doesn't seem to be any directional swings or active blocking or parrying that we've seen so far, which is disappointing after Dune fans have been treated to some incredible melee fight scenes in the books and recent films, where melee plays a huge role.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
I would have liked to see even a system similar to Last Oasis's, which does have some MMO similarities in terms of scale to Dune Awakening.
So early on we knew that we needed a skill-based combat system, which means that you have to choose the attack direction. So if I want to attack from the right, if I want to attack from the left or overhead, I have to input those directions with my mouse and then click the attack button. And you have to do the same with blocks as well. This does create some degree of skill system as well as, I would say, difficulty to learn. But one of our pillars is to keep this difficulty, particularly for the basic combat actions, at a minimum.
Perhaps this didn't mesh with the game's skill trees or was a little too hardcore for the more casual audience Dune Awakening is appealing to. However, the combat still needs to be engaging, and so far, aside from the excellent mobility potential of suspensor belts and trigger wire hooks, the combat clearly needs some refinement. I'd really like to see a deeper dive into the game's combat from Funcom, or some word on future plans on how they intend to improve the combat experience. We do know that melee was only recently reworked, and of course the game is in beta, but is 6 months enough time to improve and deliver a more engaging combat experience? Well, as far as developers go, Funcom are veterans of the industry and unafraid to tackle difficult IPs or original game concepts, but history tells us they haven't been without their controversies. Age of Conan, a unique and innovative MMO released by Funcom in 2008, suffered multiple month delays on the lead up to its release, and while Age of Conan was initially a fun and original take on the MMORPG genre, selling 1 million copies, which was a huge success at the time, it still had its fair share of glaring issues. The first 20 levels were great, but when it was time to leave the polished starter zone of Tortage, you were soon greeted with an unfinished, unpolished, imbalanced MMO experience. And while the unique directional melee combat was one of the game's defining features, it was still clunky and undercooked, requiring a lot of refinement over the game's lifetime.
My name is Erling Ellingsen.
and I'm going to take you into the core of Age of Conan. Now, when I want to start fighting something, I don't just have to target something and click on an auto attack button. No, I actually just run up to them and I start swinging my weapon in different directions in real time using these arrow keys that you can see down here, or using my keyboard.
And while I truly enjoyed Age of Conan for the few months I played it, I never returned, along with thousands of others. Conan Exiles, famous for its dong slider and one of Funcom's more recent and ultimately successful survival games, also made use of a Q1 to Q2 release delay after 15 months of early access. Refreshingly, Dune Awakening is foregoing early access and opting for wider beta over the next few months, but in my opinion, depending on how these tests go, a delay could still be on the cards for the game, and I don't think anyone would be against it if it meant more polish to some of the game's visibly weaker links. There's also the question of how much gameplay we can expect from Dune Awakening in 2025. They estimate the Haga Basin starter zone to provide around 65 hours of gameplay, but if you've been doing this long enough, and you know gamers like I do, they'll be done with that in half the time and assaulting the deep desert in a matter of days. But there is good news. Funcom's choice to approach Dune Awakening with this semi-persistent, server-meshed MMO zone system, where players travel between zones using the overland map, does mean new content can be easily added to the game, and with its alternative timeline, Funcom has cleverly set themselves up for what could hopefully be a long and rich MMO experience over many years. Overall, Dune Awakening has the big P. It has potential, and it looks like it could be the Dune game I've always wanted. Although, as I follow the game closely and keep you guys updated, I'll be managing my expectations of what to expect for this early 2025 release and beyond. So what do you think about Dune Awakening so far and its proposed 2025 release date? I'm eager to hear your thoughts, and if you're one of my Star Citizen viewers, let me know if Dune has your interest too. See you in the next one, my fellow bags of meat. Goodbye.
On Arrakis, a nameless prisoner can rise, construct an ornithopter, and take to the air. The world is yours to claim.
This is Dune Man Keith Filari reminding you today you're a returner with the full Spice Lord.